All right, welcome back, everyone. In case you don't know, my name is Jeremy Chimbert. I'm the owner and practitioner here at Pacific Northwest Shamanic Healing. And today I was thinking about kind of a list of things that I've been thinking about for a while, actually, but it's the 10 things that I've learned as a quote unquote healer over these past 10 years now. Working with clients, working on myself, working on family and friends. And the number one thing that I've learned is that I'm not actually healing you. For a long time, I believed healing was something a practitioner did to another person. Over time, I've realized that real healing cannot be forced, transferred, or even handed to someone. A healer, practitioner can guide, support, witness, create the space, but the actual healing happens within the person themselves, usually within their own energy, their own body. The body knows how to heal, the nervous system knows how to regulate, the soul knows how to return to balance. And sometimes people just simply need somebody to walk beside them long enough to remember that. And so when someone says they're healing you, that's more of an ego thing. They're not actually healing you. I consider myself now a person who removes blockages, right? So I'm removing those imprints. I'm removing the blockages out of your energy field, and now your energy is now coming into play and using itself. I teach people how to bring back their own energy that they've given away. We cut the cords, the feeding tubes, everything that is siphoning your energy, we close it off and allow you to rebuild. That's really what it's about. And the second thing I've learned is anyone can be healed, but not everyone is ready for it. And so let me explain that. It's, healing sounds beautiful. It sounds great. I really want to shift. But then it starts requiring a change. Many people want that pain to stop, but they're not ready to let go of the patterns, the relationships, the identities, or even the coping mechanisms that are connected to that pain. Healing often asks us to face truths that we've spent years avoiding. It requires honesty, surrender, accountability, and discomfort. It's being ready is not about deserving healing. It's about being willing to participate in it. And it can be a hard thing for some people. A lot of our issues are connected with emotional imbalances, things that have happened in our life that we're just not ready to let go of. Fear, I think, is related more in the kidneys. You have the spine and pressure on the back. It comes from having too much pressure in real life, and all these things can adjust. So you can't go into this work expecting a magic pill that makes all the pain go away and not have to do any of the work. The integration is the most important part. The third thing I learned, and this one's a little bit harder to accept, but everyone can be healed, but not everyone can live. And I learned this from a different teacher, and it took me a minute, but I had to really think about it. It's surviving and living are not the same thing. Many people, they become so conditioned to that stress, the fear, the trauma, that emotional survival, that peace actually can feel unsafe. And sometimes it's really just that means it's time for a person to move on. You can have someone in the hospital with cancer or some other terminal disease, and you can work on it. You can remove the cancer. You can help bring balance back to the body. But it's really the soul's time to go. Maybe there's a lesson that they're trying to teach the rest of the family. Maybe this is an experience they just came down to do. And it sounds like a cop-out until you start doing this kind of work, but it's true. Like, not everybody is meant to stay around forever. Some people they're ready to go. They have another mission, they have another job. And as hard as it is for us in this 3D realm, just know that they're not truly gone. Like they're just not. My father passed away a few years ago, and that was a hard lesson for me. I kept trying to work on him, kept trying to give him energy in the hospital, kept trying to work on him at home. And he was slowly getting better, but it wasn't enough. And I knew at that moment that it was time and that he was ready to go. And he told me so. And it was just one of those moments where you just had to let them go, as hard as it is. And so you can do the healing, but just like not everyone's ready for it, not everybody fully wants it, and they're ready to move on. And that's really hard when it's family, young children. It's really hard for that. The next thing I learned, and I've been seeing this a lot with clients, especially people, and I went through it myself, but a lot of people with severe trauma, PTSD, healing's not just about you. It's not. It starts with you, but it's not about you. Healing itself doesn't happen in isolation. When one person starts that healing journey, it changes families, relationships, friendships, even our future generations. I've said before, when we heal ourselves, we're healing 7 generations behind, 7 generations ahead. That's all true. The trauma, when it happens, it ripples out. It can destroy the family. You have the PTSD symptoms or your reaction to your trauma, pushing people away, being snappy at people, yelling, punching holes in the wall. Insert whatever you did based upon your experience here. And that ripples out, right? We all understand that. But so does healing. Healing also ripples out. And sometimes some relationships can't handle it. They're built upon that trauma. It's a trauma bond. Maybe the spouse of a person, their whole identity now is taking care of this person and basically becoming a mother. Making sure they get to their appointments on time, making sure they take their medicine, making sure they get pulled out of a situation that's too much for them, always on edge, always watching out for them. And now you have this person who starts their healing journey and no longer needs that. This becomes a whole identity shift for that spouse. What does that spouse do now? And some can take the shift perfectly, some cannot. It really depends on how that relationship was formed, when it was formed, and all those good things right there. So healing is not just about you. And this really ties into the next thing. It's not everyone's going to come with you. You're going to start your healing journey. You're going to start working on yourself. You're going to change. And a lot of people around you are not ready to change with you or don't want to. And so that's going to change the dynamic of the relationship. It's going to change what you're willing to tolerate, what you value, and how you carry yourself in the world. And some people around you are going to celebrate that. And others are going to be uncomfortable with that. And that's going to be the end of it. And maybe they'll come back later on. Maybe they won't. But ultimately, you got to do what's right for you. You got to set up your healing for you and hope that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and they'll come back. I have seen that. I have seen divorces happen. Person's on their healing journey, and then finally the ex-spouse realizes, hey, no, that is a good place to be. I do want to be there with them. Our friends, maybe you're the person who got out of the group of doing all the drugs and alcohol abuse and everything else, and one of your buddies sees your change and realizes that they want that kind of life too. That can happen. You can't force it, though. That's the biggest thing. Everyone tries to force it. Look at me. Let me help you. Let me heal you. It doesn't work. Everyone's on their own journey. Another big one is healing can feel worse before it gets better. And I think that one's kind of self-explanatory, but when we go through that process of healing, it's not always graceful. Sometimes it's going to be exhausting. It's going to be emotional. It's going to get lonely, confusing, or painful. Remember, relationships are going to be changing, breaking up, coming together. You're going to have your ups, your downs. You're going to be healing through the spiral where you're working on yourself here. Everything starts getting better. You're feeling good. You're feeling good. You're feeling good. And then, like maybe a year or so, you come back around again. And now you're going to get a little bit deeper to that problem you had before. And it's going to come up again. And then you just got to work through it again. And then maybe you come down again and it's going to get a little bit deeper. And maybe there's something else added onto it. And this could be months, this could be weeks, this could be years. It happens. There's plenty of times now where I think everything's figured out and I'm good to go. And then something new comes along that brings up something that now I'm ready to look at. And it gets easier. But in the beginning, it sucks. It's just what it is. It sucks. The next thing would be number 7, which is spirituality does not replace accountability. I see this a lot too. Oh, I'm spiritual now. I'm walking with love and light. I'm walking with Jesus. I'm walking with this religion. I'm walking with this deity. Shiva's told me this. Odin's over here watching my back. Spiritual language, it can become another form of avoidance. If we're not careful, meditation, ceremonies, energy work, and even spiritual beliefs, they do not remove the need for honesty. Emotional maturity, communication, responsibility, self-awareness. Real spirituality should make you more grounded, compassionate, and accountable. We're not bypassing our humanity. We're learning how to fully face it. And that means admitting when we did something to somebody. Not taking the avoidance route, not casting blame, listening to someone who says, hey, you caused me to feel this way when you were acting like this through your trauma or every other scenario. You pushed me away, made me feel like crap. I'm not ready to come back to you. Now, you can apologize to them. You can ask for forgiveness, but they don't have to give it to you just because you are now at this spiritual plane, just because you're now filled with love and light. That's just not how it works. You need to take ownership and accountability for what you caused somebody else. And it could be really simple as just saying, I'm sorry I made you feel that way. That was not my intent, or I was not in a good place back then. I'm in a better place now. I would really like to start over. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. So you need to not just let spirituality consume you and be the end all thing where now you can do no wrong because you pray or meditate or ascend to the upper world and get told by the light beings how great you are. It just doesn't work. The other one is I've seen is, being needed is not the same as being loved. And this kind of goes back to that relationships that we talked about earlier. It's, a lot of people who step into these helping or healing roles, they start to discover that they build their worth around being needed by others. And there's a real difference between genuine love and relationships based on emotional dependence. And then there's that need of constantly feeling like you need to be validated. And this becomes unhealthy. This becomes where the ego mixes in. It's when you're working on somebody, you have to take out your biases. You have to take out your desire for the outcome because it's not you doing the work. You're helping them. You're assisting them. You want them to feel better, but it's not your job to do it for them. And just because they're happy with you and they feel great, you need to watch yourself and realize that you might be feeding off of that feeling of being needed. That desire of, oh, I'm helping people. Now I have that dopamine rush of feeling great because they hugged me or told me how great I was. And I never got that as a child, but I'm getting it now because I'm helping people. You really got to look at that. And it's okay to be excited. It's okay to feel good about yourself, but truly check what you're doing and why. The other thing I learned is, and we kind of touched on it too, is, trauma can become an identity if we're not careful. And that goes back to those people who might not be ready to heal. The pain shapes us more deeply. There comes a point when some begin building their entire identity about what happened, that their trauma now gives them compassion where they never got it before, or attention. Um, everyone's concerned about you where before this happened, they might have ignored you. You're now the person they talk about. You're the person they check in on. And to heal that wound could take that all away. And so you're living in this world where you need people to feel sorry for you. You need people to maybe even not talk to you. Maybe that becomes your identity because now you don't want to deal with people anymore because you're living in that emotion of fear and stress. So it can go both ways. It's the same thing when like a young girl, trigger warning, gets raped and now she's wearing the baggy clothes, the baggy shirt. She's trying to make it so like she doesn't get attention from men anymore. She's doing her best to quote unquote look ugly or not look attractive. And that doesn't happen to all of them, but that is a common thing that can happen. Or a trauma happens and then someone goes full into like eating all the time and now they become this big massive person and their identity now is about being this big person. These things happen. And I'm not judging anyone for if this is you. I'm just using these as examples. And so it's really knowing the difference between honoring the story of what happened and becoming trapped inside it. What happened happened. We're not trying to erase what happened. And there's ways you can take what happened for that to be your medicine. But we don't want to get trapped in that story. We don't want to be stuck in that place where we can no longer live our lives and no longer be free and no longer be happy. Like, we don't want suffering to become so familiar that we stop imagining who we are without it. It's just not a good place to be. And the last thing I learned is the deeper the healing, the more quieter life becomes. And I find this to be true. It's chaos stops feeling exciting. The constant simulation becomes exhausting. The need to prove yourself fades. Drama loses its appeal. Like, as the healing deepens, many people, we start craving peace, simplicity, stillness, like meaningful connections, presence. We're no longer in that place of survival. We're just looking for peace. Like, I don't need to prove myself. I don't want to deal with things anymore. Like, going to a bar filled with 50 people all loud and talking doesn't seem fun anymore. I'd rather just sit outside, listen to the frogs at night, watch the geese fly around and just be one with nature and my family. And I think a lot of people who go through this journey, they start to get to that point too, where it's just, you just want the quiet, simple things. You don't need to be TikToking and Facebooking for hours or Instagram reels. Like, if it wasn't even for trying to reach out to people, I wouldn't be doing this. Like, I have no desire to be on YouTube and deal with all that, but it's important for trying to get the message out. So I hope what I mentioned makes sense to people. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you want to reach out and work with me, my link's in the show notes. Um, I do all sorts of different things, help people with grief, trauma. I have an 8-week program specifically designed to help people with severe PTSD and trauma. I teach, I have a school platform for entry $5 a month. You'll learn some basic ways to work on yourself. There's a journey work in there, there's emotion code in there, there's some grounding, some meditation. I'm going to be putting up a quantum Reiki course in there, just giving you the tools that we can all do ourselves because anyone can do this work. It is not that hard. It just takes somebody showing you how to do it. And you don't need to be a full fledged shaman or integrated healer of any kind to do this work on yourself. There's so many things you can do on your own or even for your family. If you want to go full hog and become a fully trained shaman, you can work with me as well or find someone else you resonate with. That's fine too. But really, the important thing is to work on yourself. Like if you work with me and become trained down into my lineage, it's 6 months of you doing nothing but working on yourself, and then you'll start working on others like throughout that time. But it's really, you go through the medicine wheel working on yourself. That's how you learn. That's how you get ready to be open to help others. So if you're interested, again, link in the show notes. If not, no worries. If you have any other questions, comments, tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right. Um, any suggestions? You want me to talk about anything specific? Just let me know and we can go from there. Thank you.